Hi everyone. So we're on week 4, and this week we're going to go through some just general horse information and some information on how horses move and their gaits and those kind of things, and some general horse terms. I will say this week is a lot of information, so I highly recommend that you also read the pages in the book that correspond to this section, as there's a lot of terms I'm going to use today. There's also a lot of just information that you're going to need to know that we will use throughout the rest of the semester. Some of this we won't be able to cover in lab for a couple of weeks. However, we will be covering it at one point, but this way you will know it, so when we get to that part in lab, you will be ready. So the first thing is just some terms, so everyone is on the same page and understanding of what different terms mean. This is pretty common horse lingo and things that horse people are going to say. So for instance, a stallion. Hopefully you know what this is, but it's a mature male horse used for breeding. A gelding, which is what all of our male school horses are. So although male horses will ride in lab, they are all geldings, or castrated male horses. And then a mare is a female horse, so a mature female horse over 4 years old. Younger than 4 years old, we're going to call a filly, so a young female horse under 4 years old is a filly. A young male horse under 4 years old is a colt. And then a foal is a baby horse of either gender, so mare or gelding, foal, filly or colt, that is still on its mother, so it's still nursing. Once it is no longer nursing, and usually it's taken away from its mother anywhere, so it's weaned anywhere from 6 months to a year, then we're going to call it a weanling. And then after the horse has turned a year old, then we call them a yearling. One thing to note is there is a universal birth date for all horses, and that is January 1st. So most horse breeds, they are going to consider a horse a year older on January 1st. So even if their birthday is May 1st, when it comes around to January 1st, in that breed's showing and those kind of things, they're going to consider them a yearling or a 2-year-old, depending on how old they are. So for instance, racehorses, quarter horses, some of the different showing futurity type events that they have an age specification, January 1st is where they would turn that next age. A common term is a pony. So pony is any mature horse that is under 14 hands. We measure hands in 4-inch increments. So every 4 inches is considered 1 hand. So 14.2 is going to be 58 inches. So if you took 4 times 14 plus 2, that's going to give you the 58 inches. And then a mule is going to be a cross between a male donkey and a female horse. If you have a cross between a male horse and a female donkey, then it is called a hinny. So there is a different name for that. Tack, hopefully you already know this term because I use it a lot during lab, but your bridle, your saddle, if you have a helmet, those are all going to be considered tack, because any equipment used on your horse or potentially on yourself, for instance, your spurs, those kind of things are all considered tack. A term that is used a lot by horse people, and it was on that initial information sheet you had to fill out, was green, green horses. And if you hear that term, it means that the horse is either unbroken, so it hasn't been ridden by anyone yet, or it has very minimal or not extensive training. So a green horse is one that's being started usually within the first year or so of riding them. They're considered green. Some of it depends on the showing, what you're doing with them. For instance, a jumping horse may be considered green for 2 or 3 years, but that's because it takes years to develop those skills. Offside and near side are some terms you need to know for class. So the off side of our horse is going to be the right side of our horse, because that's the side that's used less. Where most things we're going to do from the right. We're going to halter from the right. We're going to saddle from the right. I'm saying right. We're going to halter from the left. We're going to saddle from the left. We're going to bridle from the left side of our horse. And so the off side would be the right side. So the side not doing those things is going to be the off side, whereas the near side we consider the left side. So that's where we're going to do most things. It's the common side of our horse. Oh, and then I already talked about a hand. Horse height measurement equals 4 inches. Also, we measure a horse's height at their withers. So that's the highest point on our horse. So from the ground or the bottom of their hoof on their front leg up to their withers is what we're going to measure for their height in hands. Some other horse information, we're going to talk about training and getting our horses to do what we want. And some things we want to think about in the class is what type of responses we're getting and how we are working with our horses. So horses in general terms are fearful animals. If you think about it, they are prey animals. So in the wild, in nature, they would be the ones getting eaten. So that makes them more fearful. They're going to be more cautious than, for instance, a predator. They're easily spooked by loud noises, sudden movements, and things that move toward them suddenly, like a piece of paper blowing in the wind. And so that's something that you should think about a lot when you're in lab and working around your horse, is that you want to speak in calm noises. If something scary happens, no screaming, those kind of things are loud noises that could make a minimal situation a lot worse with your horse, because if they think, oh my gosh, you're scared and you're the boss, then they're going to want to be scared too. So maintaining calm noises and then no sudden movements, always making sure your horse sees you when you move towards them or you're at them. So talking to them so they see you. And then understanding that, if something does move quickly in front of them, they may jump because, sudden movements or sudden things coming at them or things that are there that weren't there before are all things that could cause that fearful behavior. And their most common response to anything scary or fearful is to run away. And so understanding where you're at, position next to them so that if they go to run away, you're not in a place that you could get run over. And horses often calm down very quickly and easily if you give them confidence by keeping them under control. So for instance, you're riding around and a piece of paper blew or a trash can fell over. If you don't make a big deal out of it, you don't jump and you just put the horse back to work pretty quickly, they usually will be like, oh, okay, wasn't a big deal. Whereas if your horse jumps a little bit and you scream or you grab hold and clinch on them, they're probably then going to take that much longer to calm down because they're sensing that you're scared of something. So tips for keeping your horse calm. And these are all things you really need to be doing in lab. If you ever get nervous or something happens that's fearful or scary to you or your horse, try not to act frightened. That is the biggest thing. Try to act like it, no big deal. I don't, that trash can fell over or that mouse ran under our feet or whatever it wasn't a big deal. Not at all. And then be confident. So get them back under control, tell them what they're doing, give them a job, maintain control, tell them easy, pull back on the reins, and then talk in a comfort and soothing voice. So, whoa, it's okay, it's not a big deal. Those kind of things are very helpful. No screaming or panicked voice. And some things about training and how we get our horses to be as good as they are, because I would say the school horses are going to be very good for you, but it took a lot of training to get them to this point. And horses obey as a result of that training. And so the things that you're going to do with them and the way you handle them is going to reinforce good training. Whereas if you do things that are not reinforcing good behavior, but reinforcing bad behavior, they're potentially going to get worse. So poor handling tends to cause horses to revert to bad habits. So cruelty, abuse, or spoiling, so too many treats, some of those things can also lead to poor behavior. So rewards and punishment, a very important topic for class is how we are going to tell them to do things and reward them for doing things correctly, and then how in class we're going to punish them for things that they shouldn't be doing. So using positive and negative reinforcement. So reward/punishment must come within 3 seconds after an action for the horse. So if you squeeze and they walk forward and that's what you wanted, the reward is you stop squeezing. So within 3 seconds of them moving, you should stop squeezing. Or you pull back and you ask them to stop and they stop. As soon as they stop moving, you stop pulling, take your legs off, you reward them for stopping. The same goes if a horse did something they shouldn't, like if they bend down to eat grass and they really should be paying attention to what you're doing, or they reach over to bite another horse, pulling on the reins and putting their head back where it goes needs to be done within 3 seconds for them to respond and understand. So rewards or positive reinforcement. We are going to use positive reinforcement as much as possible in this class. That is probably the biggest, most important thing for us working with our horses, especially on well-trained horses and horses that know what they're doing. Positive reinforcement is the best. Treats, like for your own horses, potentially giving treats, apples, carrots, or feed when they do something you want is appropriate in some cases, depending on what you're asking them to do. However, for class, I will say there is a no treat policy, so please do not bring any treats to class, as I will not allow you to give it to our horses, mainly because we monitor their diet pretty heavily. And then also some horses have a tendency to develop bad behavior of trying to bite your fingers or your pockets or those kind of things, wanting treats. But the biggest thing we're going to do for positive reinforcement is releasing pressure on either the bit or your legs when they do something that you want. So for instance, you pull on the left rein, they turn left, then you release. That release is their positive reinforcement. Or we've been trotting around and they've been really good. They've been doing everything you want. They've been circling, turning, going. And then we may stop, let them walk around with reins nice and loose and relaxed. That is also a break from work, which is also a positive reinforcement. Or we may pet them and say, good boy, that was really good. Or just saying good boy. Those are all good positive reinforcement. So next we're going to watch a little video on some reinforcements and rewards.
Hi, I'm Meredith Hodges, and welcome to the Lucky 3 Ranch. I get a lot of letters and emails from people with training and behavior questions about their equines. So I'm going to take you back to the beginning with a series of training tips that work for all equines. Your equine is much more likely to repeat good behavior when a food reward is involved. I use only crimped oats as a reward and carry them in a fanny pack for easy access. At the beginning of each new training challenge, be lavish with your food reward and offer small handfuls with each small step accomplished. Be sure to give plenty of verbal praise and encouragement. This method works whenever you're teaching your equine anything new, even something as simple as taking a step toward you. When your equine takes the first step forward, praise him and reward him for completion of that step. Then ask him for 2 steps the next time before you reward him. After he completes 2 steps with no problem, you can ask for 3 steps before rewarding him. If he doesn't give you a second step, just reward the first step. Give him a minute to process what you're asking and try to process over again from the beginning. By rewarding good behavior in small steps, the task gets easier for your equine. It is internalized and he will need to be rewarded less often for that specific task. Then you can proceed frequently rewarding the small steps in the new tasks. By the time he's in harness or under saddle, there will be fewer tasks to reward so frequently, and you won't need to dispense rewards while in the arena, only before and after workouts.
So you can see from that video, using treats initially, and then once you're riding, they're not really giving treats while you're on the horse. Those rewards are going to come from releasing pressure, but it's just a good way to think about how you go through that process. So with rewards, there is punishment. Sometimes our horses do things that we don't want them to, but there are good ways there are positive ways for punishment, and there are negative. And we are going to try and make sure we're doing positive things with our horses. So some punishment is not always things such as being hit with a crop or jabbed with a spur. It could just be a harsh voice. So you may just say, stop that, or whatever it is. You'll probably have noticed some of you, the horses are pawing, and I may say their name kind of in a not the best tone. And a lot of horses will respond to that and understand that means, oh, I should stop doing that. So that is also a way to punish them without having to actually do physical anything. Another option is, so we said for a reward is releasing pressure on the bit or on their legs when they do what you want. Whereas a punishment could be just increasing that pressure. So we talked last week about ask, tell, command. And so a punishment is that you asked nicely, they didn't do it, then you squeezed harder. And then if they still didn't do what you want, then you kicked them. And that kicking is considered a punishment because it's a stronger aid. So increasing your aid, increasing what you're doing is also another way to say, no, you didn't do what I wanted, but this is what I want. Or not allowing them to do what they want. So for instance, there are some horses that we're going to ride in class that you're going to pull and ask them to turn, and they may just stop and stand still or turn their head around around their neck to your side and not move. And with those things, their punishment is that they do not get to do that. You are going to kick them and tell them, no, they must go forward. And then when they don't want to turn left and they're trying to go right, you're going to say, no, you're really going to turn left, and you're going to make them turn left. And so that is another type of punishment. And then a horse that is young and green and sometimes just more work, and making it harder on them and making them work through some of their difficulty and work harder is a punishment enough that they will be like, oh, I want to be good, so I only have to work 10 minutes instead of half an hour. But the rewards and punishment must fit the situation. So if your horse just won't turn and they stop in the middle or they're bending their head around, that does not require a severe, hit them on the butt or scream at them, those types of punishment. Instead, it would just mean you need to squeeze harder and you need to be a little more forceful, but not cruel or any of those kind of things. And then you want to make sure your horse isn't getting rewarded for doing something they should not do. So for instance, that horse that doesn't want to turn and you're asking them to turn left, they keep going to the right. If you stop telling them to go to the left and say, okay, fine, we'll go to the right, then you just rewarded them for bad behavior. And so you'll probably notice in class, I'm probably going to be like, no, you have to keep turning left. You must make them go left. And that is for your benefit, because if you win those little battles of telling them, no, we are going left, then later on they will respect you and are going to be more likely to do what you want. And then another thing is to avoid accidental punishment. And that would mean, for instance, let's say you want your horse to stop and you pull back on the reins and they stop, but then you keep pulling. That is an accidental punishment, because you are then still pulling, telling them to be stopping. So you're still applying pressure to their mouth, but all you wanted was for them to stop. And so they're going to get confused and not understand. Or for instance, you kick and they go, and then you keep kicking. Well, they're like, oh, I guess they want me to go faster. So they're going to keep going. And then you're pulling the reins because you're like, oh, no, I didn't want you to go that fast. That would be an accidental punishment, because that was caused by you from squeezing too much. And that's then why you had to pull. And so we want to try to avoid those type of situations. The next thing would be cruelty. A A rider is considered cruel when she hurts the horse or does unsafe things with them. Cruelty is never acceptable, and I am a very big proponent of no cruelty. There are times when hitting them on the butt with a bat or using spurs effectively is appropriate, because there are some horses that are a little dead-sided. They don't necessarily feel everything or respond very quickly, and that is acceptable. Or if they're bucking and those kind of things, there may be some times when things like that are necessary, I said, but for the most part, it is not acceptable. Yanking on the reins is never acceptable, and I will probably not be happy with you if you do this. We are going to ride them as softly as possible. We will ask them with the reins. If they're good, yay. If we need to ask more severely, we can, but that does not ever mean yanking on them. So good riding means never hurting or abusing your horse, whether accidentally or on purpose. So please keep that in mind. We want to be nice. Our horses get ridden a lot. They're trying to do their job. Sometimes they just don't understand. Okay, so the next thing is the parts of the hoof. I will want you to know the parts of the hoof. It could be potentially on a quiz. It is important so that if there's something wrong that you can tell me. And also you're picking out their feet every day, so you should know the parts. You should already know the cornet band, and then the whole thing is called the hoof. Heel, pretty easy part to know. The hoof wall is the outer portion. Toe, hopefully you would understand that. And then heel, cleft, commissures are what the groove where you are going to be cleaning out the dirt along their frog. That is your commissures. So you need to make sure when you're picking their feet, you're picking out the commissures. And then on the edges of that is called the bars of the frog, where it's up higher and sticks out. And then the sole, the wall, the toe, and then where the wall connects to the sole of their foot, that is considered the white line. So make sure you study those parts for the quiz. Common horse colors. So this week in lab, you will be asked to identify what color your horse is and the markings that are on your horse. So there is a worksheet that is attached to this module that you will need to fill out and return to lab the following week. So next week in lab, you will need to return that worksheet. I'm not going to go through all of these colors with you, but chestnut sorrel is a reddish brown color. Depending on the breed association, it depends on if you would call it a chestnut or a sorrel, but basically it's the same color. A bay is going to be kind of a brownish color, and then they should have black points. Black points are designated as the tips of their ears. A black mane and black tail, and usually black legs would be a bay. They can have white leg markings. So if they have white legs, that is considered a marking and not part of their horse color. So as you can see in the picture of the bay, they have black legs, but then they do also have white leg markings, but they're still a bay. A palomino is going to be like a light golden tan color with a white mane and tail, or a tan mane and tail they could have, especially if they're dirty. A dun is like similar to a palomino, except for instead of white, they have black points. So black mane and tail, black tips of their ears, black legs. A dun will always have a stripe down their back, so you can see the picture of the dun. They have a stripe down their back, and then they usually have striping on their legs. Sometimes really visible, sometimes less. A brown horse, usually like in the wintertime, they are going to look black. However, they're really brown. But the way to tell the difference between a brown horse and a black horse is a brown horse's muzzle area and flank area is always going to have brown hair, whereas a true black horse will have a black body coat plus black muzzle and black flank area. So those are things to look at to determine if your horse is actually a brown or if they are a black. A roan is going to be any horse color mixed with white. So they're going to have like a base body color that has a lot of white hair dispersed within it. And then there are different specification of names depending on what that color with the white is. And a roan usually will have a darker head. So you can see both these pictures, they have darker heads. And there's blue roan, strawberry roan. You can look at those. Next is a buckskin, similar to a dun, but without the stripe down their back. So they're going to be that light golden color with the black mane and tail, black legs, but without a dorsal stripe, so no stripe down their back. A white horse, there are very few true white horses. It is something that genetically there's potential for lethal genes if they are true whites. So there are sometimes occasionally a white horse, but not very often. If they are a true white horse, they are born white. And they have pink skin, and usually they have pink or blue eyes. But again, not a very common color. Gray is actually what we're going to call most horses that look white. And they are called gray because they're going to be born a dark color. So they're going to have like a black skin. They may be a bay when they're born. They may be a sorrel when they're born. They may be black when they're born. And then as they age, they're going to get whiter and whiter. And then there's different colorings within that gray. But overall, they're all considered a gray. Then we have paints or pintos. It's going to be a white with large patches of another color. There's overos and tobianos and piebalds and skewbalds. I don't really care if you know all of that, as long as you know if they're two colors like that, that's patches of two colors, they are a paint or a pinto. So then moving on to markings. You will need to be able to identify different markings and what they're called. A brand is considered a marking. So if they have a mark on their hips or shoulder that is man-made, that's been put on them to designate that horse, it's usually made with a hot iron, is considered a brand, or a freeze brand would also be done with a cold instrument, and those usually have white hair or they scar. And then another type of marking would be a scar. Like if they have a really severe scar, that would be considered a marking. So when you do your worksheet on filling out your markings and color of your horse, if they have any large scars or brands, you would want to denote those on the sheet. Next are face markings. So this diagram, the picture shows lots of different markings, but as long as you know some of the basic ones. For instance, a star is any type of marking that's on their forehead, and they're all different shapes. They could be triangle, they could be all wiggly, they could be tiny, they could be like the size of your thumbnail, and it might still be considered a star if they have white hair on their forehead. A snip is going to be white hair that's down on their muzzle, so but a very small, narrow amount of white on their muzzle. And then a stripe or a strip is going to go all the way down their face. So if they have white down the bridge of their nose, that would be considered a strip. So some horses may actually have a star, a snip, and a strip. So they have like a star, they have like a little thin line, which would be the strip, and then they have a little part that goes over their muzzle, which would be called a snip. So you can see in this picture we have a horse. The third one on the top row has a stripe and a snip, and actually probably has a star too because it has white up on his forehead. Or the third one in the bottom has a star and a strip because it doesn't go all the way down to the muzzle to have a snip. A blaze is a wider mark down the face. So if it starts in the forehead and it goes wide all the way down, that is considered a blaze. However, if it's really wide all the way to like their eyes, then we call that a bald face. Because it's going to go across the forehead, including one eye, and goes down the side of the face. Next, we have leg markings. So we have stockings, which are white markings from the hoof to the knee, or hock if it's the hind leg. Half stocking is about halfway up their cannon. A sock or anklet is going to go up over their fetlock, but just up into the fetlock area. Pastern is going to be below the fetlock, white marking. A cornet would just be a little bit right around that cornet band, so not up into their pastern, so just a slight ring around. A heel spot is just a little bit of white on their heel and not all the way around the hoof. And then an ermine spot is they have like a white leg and then they have a dark spot on their foot. So again, make sure you know all of those different things. different markings. So the next thing we're going to get into is the gaits of our horse. This is stuff that I will want you to know. We will go over it in lab, maybe not this week, but the next, since we have our practical, but we will go over it probably the next week. So horses have 4 basic or natural gaits, and those are the walk, the trot or the jog, the canter or the lope, and then the gallop. So walk, trot, canter, gallop, or walk, jog, lope, gallop. Depending on your discipline, you may use different terms. So some important parts about their gait. Horses have a center of gravity. It's an imaginary balance point, which we'll go into this again next week when we talk about our balance on our horse and your horse's balance. But horses are rear engine animals. So in order to drive themselves forward, they really need to use their hindquarters to really push them forward. However, the bad part about horses is they actually carry more weight on their front end. So they carry about 55% of their weight on their front end, about 45% on their hind end. And so when riding, we have to work towards shifting that weight to their hind end so they can really utilize their body correctly. Some things to know is a step would be one leg movement. A stride is going to be a sequence within a gait which all 4 legs complete one step. So one step is one leg. Once all 4 legs have done that, that is considered a stride. Swing phase is going to be when the leg swings backward, then flexes and swings forward. Grounding is when the hoof hits the ground during this step or stride. And support is when the foot is on the ground during a stride. And then thrust is when the leg reaches the vertical position under the weight and continues until the hoof breaks or the breakover point. Which I'm not going to test you on that part, but it's just good to kind of understand that. So I already talked about their hindquarter muscles provide power that push them forward. They have muscles in their back and neck and an abdomen that are going to lift up as they push them forward. And so later in this semester, we'll talk about collection, and that is really important for correct movement of your horse. But some important things that we need to go over today are each of the 4 gaits and how they work. So the first one, which we've already done in class and lab, is walk. A walk is a 4-beat gait. It is the slowest gait. It usually averages about 4 miles per hour. And so I want you to know the footfall pattern for a horse at the walk. And so the footfall pattern is the sequence in which a horse's legs move and how they move together to form a walk, a jog, a lope, or a gallop. So the walk is a 4-beat gait. So you can see from the little hoof prints how that works. So the sequence of footfall pattern for the walk is going to start with either hind leg. So it doesn't really matter, but for this example, it's starting with the right hind. So right hind, and then the right front is going to move forward, followed by the rear hind, and then the rear left, followed by the front left. So right hind, right front, left hind, left front. Or you could start with the left hind. So it'd be then left hind, left front, right hind, right front. So make sure you know that footfall pattern. It will be probably asked on a quiz is how many beats. And then what is the footfall pattern for the walk. The next is the trot. The trot is a 2-beat diagonal gait. And it averages about 6 to 8 miles per hour depending on the type of horse. So the legs are going to work in diagonal pairs. So if you think about it, they're going to be crisscross. So you're going to have the right hind and the left front are going to go at the same time. And then the left hind and the right front are going to go at the same time. So you can see the 2 footprint diagrams showing the first beat on the one on the left is the right hind, left front. The second beat is your left hind, right front. And then another option would be left hind, right front together, and then right hind, left front together. So they work in diagonal pairs. So that's how you get 2 beats. And you can see on the horse diagram showing their legs, which 2 feet are on the ground at the same time and which 2 feet are in the air at the same time. So that is that footfall pattern. If they are doing a really slow trot, it is sometimes referred to as a jog. So specifically in our Western events, a lot of times they're going to call it a jog rather than a trot. The trot is a very stable gait. They're usually going to be very balanced with their head and neck. Unlike the canter and the gallop, which those are going to be used for speed, they can't maintain a gallop or the lope for long distances, where a trot, they can maintain for a long amount of time. Then the next gait is our canter or our lope. I would say if you ride hunt seat, then it is commonly referred to as a canter, whereas if you ride Western, it's commonly referred to as a lope. However, there are some specific events within Western that do call it a canter. For instance, in reining, if you read all the reining rule books, it's called a canter. So it just kind of depends on what you're showing in and doing. But the interesting part about a canter is it is a 3-beat gait. It's faster than a trot, but then it should be slower than the gallop, and it averages in speed from 8 to 14 miles per hour, and that depends on the length of the horse's stride. So one important thing that you need to know about the canter or lope is that a horse, when they're cantering or loping, will be in either a left lead or a right lead, and that depends on which direction they are going in the arena, or which direction they're in would designate which lead they should be on. Now, horses could potentially pick up the wrong one, but for them to be really balanced, they should be in the correct lead. So a left lead, if we are going to the left in the arena, so your horse's head is going to the left, so you're making a left circle, then a horse should ideally be in the left lead. Whereas if you're going to the right in the arena, their head is to the right, a right circle, they should be in the right lead. And how you designate which lead they're in is, if you look at their front legs as they are loping, the leading leg, so the leg that's going to be out in front, determines which lead they are on. So if their right leg is out in front, then they are on a right lead. If their left front leg is out in front, then they are in a left lead. So the footfall pattern, one thing I forgot to mention with the walk and the trot is they always start with the hind legs because, as I said before, horses are a rear engine animal, so they need to drive from behind. So we're always going to start our footfall pattern with a hind leg. So make sure you do that when you're answering questions. So the left lead lope, you can see in that bottom left picture, it's going to start with the right hind. And then you're going to have the left hind and right front. They're going to hit the ground together. And then your left front is going to be the last one to hit. And that is because it is going to be, they go up and out. And that left front is leading the way. So it's going to be the last leg to go in that footfall pattern. So if that helps you, sometimes when you're doing footfall patterns for the lope and you're writing it down, sometimes it's best to start with the last foot. So the last foot in the sequence, and work your way back in your mind and then write it down. So then our right lead needs to end with the right front. So to do that, it must start with your left hind. So left hind is 1, then your right hind, your left front together is 2, and then your right front is the 3rd beat. So left hind, left front together 2, right front 3. So make sure you know these, look at them, study them. And then lastly, the last gait we're going to go over is the gallop. And the gallop is similar to our lope, except for instead of being 3 beats, it's 4 beats. But it's going to follow the same footfall pattern, except for the 2 legs are not going to be together. They are going to hit separately when they are galloping. The average speed for a gallop is 12 to 30 miles per hour. So the left lead at a gallop is going to be the right hind, left hind, right front, left front. So remember, hind legs are always going to be first. So the left lead ends with that left front because that's the leading leg. So it's going to start with the opposite hind leg. So right hind, left hind, right front, left front. And then if we were on the right lead at the gallop, it's going to be left hind, left front, right front. So make sure you look through that and understand those footfall patterns and sequences. I think I already said all that, so I'm going to show you a little video so you can see this and understand those football patterns and actually see it in action.
Footfall, emphasizing the diagonal with 5-minute horse lessons. In this segment, we're going to analyze the walk, the trot, and then we'll take a look at the lope or the canter, and we'll also take a look at the backup, all highlighting the importance of the diagonal. To begin, let's define that diagonal. A diagonal is a straight line which joins opposite corners of a square or a rectangle. And our horse's feet at the standstill are that rectangle. We'll start with the backup. I want to start with the backup because it's very easy to see the diagonal steps at the backup. And by that diagonal, I mean she's stepping with her white legs, and now her red legs, and now her white legs, red legs, until finally she comes to a halt on all four. And that diagonal is very important for your horse's balance. That's how your horse maintains balance in each gait. Now the trot. The trot has a very distinctive diagonal, just like the backup that we just saw. Here the trot is slowed down to about 50%, and we have a freeze frame here so we can see the white diagonal legs, and then there's a moment of suspension, and then the red diagonals land. So here, the right front and the left hind are on the ground for this diagonal. And on her next step, her left front and her right rear are on the ground for the white diagonal. And then it repeats again. So it goes red and white. And that is the trot. It is the most obvious diagonally based gait. Moving on to the lope. At the lope, or the canter, there is just one diagonal right there with the red legs. So the strike foot is the white foot, the diagonal, and the completion step. The lope is a 3-beat gait with a moment of suspension right there, and then a strike foot, diagonal, leading foot. This is a left lead. It's considered a 3-beat gait. So after the moment of suspension, 1, 2, 3, moment of suspension. Good. Now let's review. First, we looked at the diagonal at the backup. So we've got a red and a white, red and white. And at the trot, we have a red and a white diagonal. And at the lope, we have a red diagonal only, completion step, strike step, diagonal, completion step. And now we're going to take a look at the walk, which is the most difficult gait to analyze. Let's slow the walk down so you can see how Katie's feet are moving here. She's going to step now with her left hind, left 4, right hind, right 4, left hind, left 4, right hind, right 4. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, why didn't you put the wraps on her legs like this? Left, left, right, right, red, red, white, white. And the reason I don't leave the wraps like that is because I want you to see how the diagonal works at the walk. Here you see the red diagonal and how now she'll step to the white. And now there's a white diagonal. And now she'll step again to the red. Look, there's our red diagonal again. And then she's going to step again with 2 feet, 1, 2. And there's our white diagonal, red diagonal, and a white diagonal. And again, our red diagonal. So even at the walk, you can see how important this diagonal is to the balance and the gait of your horse. One last review. We've got our backup, white diagonal, red diagonal, white diagonal, red diagonal. At the trot, there's the red diagonal, and now the white diagonal, red diagonal. At the lope, we've got our red diagonal and the completion step, strike step, diagonal, completion step. And now at the walk, again, we've got red diagonal and a white diagonal, a red diagonal, a white diagonal, red diagonal, white diagonal. And that is footfall, emphasizing the diagonal with 5-minute horse lessons.
Okay, so hopefully from those videos you could see those footfall patterns and see that the walk is a 4-beat gait, one side then the other, and the trot is a 2-beat gait with diagonal pairs, and then the lope is a 3-beat gait with a ending with your leading leg. So hopefully you could see all that. You'll need to know those footfall patterns. So make sure you look at those. We will be looking at those in lab, hopefully in a couple weeks. All right, so make sure you take the quiz and that you also print off your marking sheet because you will need to turn that in lab. Thank you.